Welcome to our channel, where powerful, true-to-life stories come alive. Stories of betrayal, resilience, and the quiet revenge that speaks loudest. If you believe in standing up for yourself, valuing truth over appearances, and finding strength in silence, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that just might change how you see the world. Let's get into it. I still remember the exact moment everything went black. One minute I was climbing the ladder to fix a leaky roof tile, and the next, I woke up to the sterile beeping of machines and a dull, aching weight on my chest. My body was in a hospital bed, wires tangled around my arms, tubes taped to my nose, and a clock ticking somewhere just beyond the pain. My first thought wasn't fear or confusion, it was loneliness. Not one familiar voice, not one hand to hold. Just the antiseptic smell of the ICU and the quiet hum of indifference. I turned my head slowly, each muscle screaming in protest, hoping to see someone, anyone, from my family. But the room was empty. My sister, Eva, hadn't shown up. Not even a nurse had mentioned a visitor for me. We weren't exactly close, but we weren't enemies either, or so I thought. Eva always had a flair for drama, a way of making everything about her. But deep down, I believed she'd come running if something ever happened to me. We'd lost our parents years ago, and I thought that made our bond stronger. I was wrong, dead wrong. Later that day, when I asked the nurse if my emergency contact had been notified, she gave me a sympathetic look and said, "Yes, your sister came in, but she didn't stay long." My heart sank. She had come? Then why wasn't she here now? The nurse hesitated, then added, "She seemed preoccupied." It wasn't until 2 days later that I found out what had preoccupied her. Apparently, while I lay unconscious in the ICU, Eva had driven straight to our late parents' house, the one we were supposed to be selling, and had a meltdown, a full-blown tantrum. Because the interior decorator suggested beige curtains instead of the velvet burgundy ones she had her heart set on. She cried. She yelled. She told the contractor she wouldn't tolerate this level of aesthetic insult, all while I was barely breathing 2 cities away. The doctor told me I had narrowly survived a spinal fracture and a collapsed lung. I needed surgery, rest, and support. Eva sent a fruit basket. No visits. No calls. Just a damn fruit basket and a forwarded email from the decorator asking if she could please be allowed to proceed without more emotional outbursts. That was the first crack. The moment my idea of family began to splinter into something unrecognizable. It wasn't just that she didn't come. It was the priority she chose instead. I couldn't shake it. Lying there, watching the ceiling blur through tears I tried to blink away, I realized something. I was on my own. And maybe I had always been. Recovery was slow, and the silence from my sister was louder than any alarm in the ICU. I spent 2 more weeks in that hospital, stitched up and stitched over with bruises both physical and emotional. The physical pain dulled with medication, but the ache in my chest grew sharper with every passing day she didn't show. Nurses came and went. A volunteer dropped off a crossword book. A janitor gave me an extra blanket once. But Eva? Eva sent exactly one text. "Hope you're doing better. I'm tied up with the decorator. Let me know when you're discharged." That was it. Like I was an appointment to be rescheduled, not her only brother recovering from a near-death fall. When I was finally wheeled out in a borrowed jacket and a hospital-issued pair of slippers, I didn't head home. I had unfinished business. I asked the cab driver to take me straight to the old house. Our family home, the one our parents had poured their hearts and money into, was meant to be sold after their passing. Eva and I had agreed on that. We even had a buyer lined up. But something didn't sit right with me now. If she had time to scream over curtain fabrics and host tastings for potential buyers, why hadn't she made time for me? As I stepped onto the familiar porch, leaning heavily on a cane, I immediately noticed the door was painted a new color. Not just any color, either. Some gaudy lavender with golden trimming that screamed ego trip. I rang the bell and waited. The muffled sound of heels on hardwood floors came closer until the door flung open and Eva stood there, mid-laugh, a champagne flute in her hand. Her eyes widened when she saw me, pale, stiff, and glaring. "Jason," she gasped, her voice sharp with surprise but entirely void of guilt. Why didn't you tell me you were out? I would have sent someone to pick you up. I stepped past her without asking. Didn't realize I had to make a reservation to see my own sister. Or is it your house now? The entryway had been redone with abstract art and scented candles. She was redecorating everything. Not just the curtains, not just the paint, everything. It looked more like a showroom than a home. I turned to her. You knew I was in intensive care? You showed up to the hospital, saw I wasn't awake, and left to argue over fabric. Her lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. You didn't even stay, I continued. Didn't leave a message. Didn't ask to see the doctor. You went home to cry about drapes. I was overwhelmed, she finally muttered. Everything hit me at once. The house, the sale, your fall. Jason, I panicked. No, I said, shaking my head. You prioritized. That's what you did. And I wasn't the priority. She flinched. A full second of silence passed between us before she deflected. You don't understand what I've been dealing with. I've had to push the sale forward alone, make design decisions under pressure, host potential investors. You mean you've been redesigning a house we agreed to sell as is? I cut in. Using funds from our joint account without even informing me? Her face changed. A flicker of panic. Caught. Oh, you thought I wouldn't find out. I said. I checked. I had time to go through bank statements while I was stuck in a bed you never visited. She crossed her arms, voice now defensive. I only used what I thought was necessary. You were in the hospital. I didn't want to bother you. No, you didn't want to be accountable. I snapped. This wasn't just neglect. You deliberately kept me in the dark while you turned our family's legacy into your personal gallery. She looked away, jaw clenched. But I wasn't finished. You knew I was vulnerable. You thought I wouldn't notice if you took control while I was drugged and broken. But I see it now, Eva. This isn't grief. This is greed. And you better believe I'm not signing off on a single offer until this place is restored, and you're out of it. Her eyes welled up, not from remorse, but rage. You can't do that, she said, trembling. The buyers are already lined up. They love my design. Then they can buy your house, Eva, I said, stepping closer. Because this one is still half mine. I turned and walked out, each step heavier than the last, but more grounded than I'd felt in weeks. I wasn't just healing. I was reclaiming. And this time, I'd make sure I wasn't forgotten again. I thought that after confronting Eva, she'd calm down, maybe even apologize. But I underestimated how far she'd go to protect her fantasy. 2 days after I walked out of the house, I received a thick envelope hand-delivered by a courier. Inside, a cease and desist letter, signed by a lawyer I vaguely remembered from our parents' probate case. According to the document, Eva claimed exclusive decision-making rights over the property due to temporary medical incapacitation on my part. She argued I had been unfit to handle estate matters during my hospitalization, and therefore, everything she had done was legal. I sat with the letter in my lap for a long time, barely breathing. Not because of fear, but because of how deeply I now understood the depth of her entitlement. She hadn't just forgotten me in the ICU, she had used it. She weaponized my injury to seize full control. That wasn't just selfishness. That was strategy. But she made one mistake. She assumed I'd stay down. By the following morning, I was seated in the office of a real estate and probate lawyer downtown. His name was Clark, mid-40s, sharp eyes, and sharper memory. I told him everything from the accident to Eva's spending spree. He listened quietly, nodding, scribbling notes, only interrupting once to ask, "Did you sign anything while in the hospital?" I told him no. Not a single document. I was heavily medicated and under supervision the entire time. That detail, he said, would prove crucial. Clark promised he'd handle it swiftly. Within 3 days, a formal injunction was filed preventing Eva from making further modifications or sales decisions regarding the house. And just to make it sting, we requested an audit of all financial transactions made from our joint account since the day I was admitted to the hospital. That same evening, I showed up at the house again. This time, Eva wasn't alone. She was hosting what looked like a private viewing. Glasses of wine on silver trays, artificial jazz humming in the background, and a group of overdressed couples touring the property like it was an art gallery. They had no idea they were sipping wine in the middle of a legal tug-of-war. I stepped through the doors, cane in hand, ignoring the shocked looks and stiff smiles. Eva nearly dropped her glass when she saw me. "Jason, what are you?" "Taking back what's mine," I said calmly, then turned to the guests. "Apologies, everyone. This showing is over. The property is under legal dispute. You may want to contact your agents before placing any bids." Gasps. Confused murmurs. One woman dropped her brochure and looked around nervously. I watched the mood shift from eager to awkward in a matter of seconds. Eva's jaw moved like she wanted to scream, but I handed her a copy of the court order before she could get a word out. Her voice dropped into a whisper-laced hiss. "You're ruining everything." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I'm fixing what you tried to ruin." After the guests left, some in a rush, others pretending not to notice the tension, I sat in the living room, surrounded by furniture that didn't belong, paint colors that clashed with the soul of the house, and a sister I could no longer recognize. She finally broke the silence. "You don't understand. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I needed this. I needed something that felt like mine." "It was ours, Eva," I replied. "But you made it about you. You turned grief into a spotlight. You chose fabrics over family. And now you've lost both." She started to cry, but I didn't offer comfort this time. I stood up slowly, pain shooting down my side, but I stood taller than I had in weeks. "This house will be sold," I told her. "But it'll be done right. No velvet lies. No golden paint. No manipulation." I walked to the front door and paused. "And Eva, I won't be forgotten again. By you or anyone." The following weeks felt like slowly untying a knot that had been pulled too tight. Every corner of the house held a war between what was and what Eva had tried to impose. I started by calling in the original appraiser, who shook his head at the flashy renovations. "This house had classic charm," he said, walking through the dining room now painted in harsh golds and purples. "Now it looks like a showroom in denial." I nodded, already planning to strip the walls back to their original color. I wasn't restoring a building. I was reclaiming a legacy. Every nail I removed, every fabric I discarded, reminded me of what family was supposed to mean. Eva, however, didn't back down easily. She went quiet after the court order, but I knew that silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. Sure enough, 3 weeks later, I woke up to a storm of messages and calls from old friends, extended family, even my employer. Eva had gone public. She sat down with a local lifestyle blog for a dramatic exclusive where she painted herself as the grieving sister left to handle everything alone, while her brother, she claimed, spiraled emotionally and threatened the future of their family home. She posed next to the curtains I had already pulled down, tearfully describing how they represented her mother's strength. I read the article twice, then once more just to let the absurdity settle. I wasn't even angry, I was amazed. She hadn't just twisted the truth. She tied it in a bow and served it to the world with a sob story and a Photoshop smile. But the truth had its own power. I sent Clark the article, and he grinned like a wolf. "Perfect," he said. "Let's correct the narrative." The very next day, we released a statement of our own, not to a gossip blog, but to the local news. It included court documents, bank statements, and a brief but pointed summary of what happened: my accident, my recovery, the misappropriation of joint funds, the unauthorized renovations, and the attempt to declare me mentally unfit while I was under sedation. But we didn't stop there. I invited the same journalist who wrote her puff piece for a follow-up, this time at the house. I walked him through every room, showing him before and after photos, medical discharge reports, and even my surgery scars. No dramatics. No tears. Just the truth, laid bare like an old floorboard finally being restored. The story hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a revelation. People saw through her curtain act. Friends who had distanced themselves called to apologize. An old neighbor wrote me a letter, saying, "Your parents would be proud of how you're honoring their memory. That place feels like them again." Eva, for her part, stayed silent. No more blog posts. No more champagne viewings. She packed up one night while I was out overseeing repairs and left the keys on the front porch in an envelope that read, "You win." But this wasn't about winning. It was about truth, about value, about choosing people over appearances, something Eva had forgotten the moment She picked out curtain fabrics while I lay unconscious in a hospital bed. The house eventually sold, just as we'd originally planned. Not for the inflated price she'd aimed for, but for a fair one. Offered by a quiet couple who wanted to raise their kids in a home with character, not chaos. As I handed them the keys, I looked around the empty living room one last time. No velvet, no gold, just warm light, smooth walls, and the echo of memories that had finally been set right. And in that moment, I felt whole again. It's strange how time moves differently after closure. Not faster, not slower, just cleaner, sharper. Like a fog finally lifts, and everything looks painfully clear. It's been a year since I last stood in that house. The couple who bought it sends me a Christmas card every year now. The last one had a photo of their daughter coloring in what used to be our old study, now a sunny playroom filled with warmth. That image did something to me. Not sadness, not pride, something deeper. I realized I'd finally made peace with what the house meant and what it never could be again. I moved to a quieter part of town, into a modest but comfortable apartment with high ceilings and no history. Nothing haunted the walls here. No expectations or ghosts in the furniture. Just space. Space to heal. Space to breathe. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. It started small, just a brush dipped in silence and memory. But it grew. I sold my first piece last fall, and for the first time in years, I wasn't someone's caretaker or shadow or silent casualty. I was just me, Jason, the artist. As for Eva, we haven't spoken since the day she left the keys. I heard through one of her former decorators that she tried to relaunch her design career under a new name. Eva Laurent, like a knockoff handbag line. She held a pop-up event in a warehouse gallery, but barely anyone showed. Maybe it was karma. Maybe it was timing. Or maybe people just don't buy stories stitched from fabric and lies anymore. Sometimes I wonder if she regrets it all. Not just the house, but the hospital, the silence, the weaponized grief. But I don't dwell on it. Because I've learned something crucial. Some rooms are better left closed. You don't keep trying to decorate a place that was never meant to be a home again. You let it go. You build new walls, with new people, on new ground. The last time I passed by the old house, I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I just looked once in the rearview mirror, smiled, and drove forward. Not to escape it, but because I didn't need it anymore. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We post stories that shine a light on truth, resilience, and the quiet power of walking away when you've had enough. Thank you for listening.